Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Everyday Arborist podcast. My name is Cam, and we're just getting this thing off the ground. Last week, we had my friend Alex Molick from A&M Tree Care on, and this week, we have a really special guest I've been excited about having on, Benjamin. You like Ben or Benjamin? Is that
Either one is fine.
okay?
The ironic thing is my last name is Moore, so
Nice, like the painting.
yep, I get that
Yeah.
joke every day.
Oh, man. Well, cool. Yeah, Ben from Scenic Arborist in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Ben, we met very shortly. What was that, like 2 years ago? My parents live in Ooltewah, and I had followed you on Instagram. I was like, dude, I've got to meet you guys. And I think you maybe you posted about stickers or something you have, and I'm like a sticker freak for like helmets and all the tools and everything. And so you're like, cool, man, sure, whatever. Swing by and grab a sticker. And so you guys were super kind, and it was fun, like meeting your family really quick. And you guys had like a really cool like front yard area. I don't know if you guys call that like I know some people call it like front yard garden or just like a native area. That was pretty cool.
Thanks. Yeah, I do gardening, and I work outside all day, so sometimes it can be trying in the summertime, for sure. It's something I can connect with a lot of clients that just love for plants. We have a lot of like master gardener clients that love plants, and so I can really connect with people on that level.
Does that happen a lot on like, I guess you would call that the North Shore technically? You're on the north side of the Tennessee River. Is that kind of like more of that scene of people who do the gardening thing, or
Not
is that out
necessarily.
around everywhere?
Yeah, my garden is pretty ridiculous. It's just a bunch of trash, and I kind of use the front yard to define how like nonconformist I am about lawns and other.
Take this, society.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's cool. Well, when I first found out about you guys, I was pumped because I'm from Dalton, Georgia. I don't know if you remember me sharing that, but like
Sure.
really not far away from that at all. And I grew up there. I'm 30, so from 1995 to when I was 18, like Chattanooga was not what it is now, and it's been super cool to watch it evolve. But like when I look back on it, it still feels like a small town to me, because like all I remember is like field trips up to like the aquarium or going to Lookouts games as a kid, and it just feels like the smallish town with some towers and buildings in it, but it still feels kind of like homey in some way. So I was like super pumped. I'm like, there's a tree company there of like awesome arborists that are like killing it and like have, what looks like an awesome culture. And, so I was pumped to see that from afar when I first moved to Nashville. And then it was cool to meet you. And, it's really cool to see like, I'm a huge like branding guy. So if people have like, I'm easily hooked on good branding, like if there's like a bottle of whiskey with good branding, I'm like, okay, I'm not even a whiskey guy, but you will almost make me drink it if you have good branding. But yeah, you guys have really cool logo, and even like just seeing in your Instagram, like what do you call it? The arborist spotlights of like the people you have on your team. That's that's really cool to see how you highlight your team, and even how you talk about the city of Chattanooga. That's also really cool. And we can kind of delve in to maybe a couple of those things here in a little bit, but we could start like, did you grow up around Chattanooga or?
I didn't. I'm originally from Austin, Texas, which is kind of right in the middle. Not a ton of trees. I mean, it's hill country. It's like on the edge of a desert, pretty much, like not a ton of rainfall. So the rain that we do get and the trees that we do have are not taken for granted. They're like very much so. And then Austin is very liberal. So they have very strict tree ordinance and codes in regards to development and preservation. Here, trees are so ubiquitous, they're just everywhere. So people take them for granted, at least from my point of view. So when I initially moved here, the biodiversity, the amount, not just the type, but the amount of trees that were here was really exciting.
Yeah.
And I'm very similar with my hometown. Every time I go back home, it's like, wow, this town is now a city. Like,
yeah.
And so I think everyone has that about their own hometowns going back. But yeah, this used to be a rural area of the country and one of the poorest areas in the nation.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the impetus of TVA and EPB and all of the surplus federal funding back in like New Deal days.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I started. I started at EPB locally.
Oh, okay. Nice.
And I worked for several other tree companies in town before realizing that there wasn't the arborist company. There was the tree remover. There was the cheap. There was the, you need a tree down, we'll do it for you.
Yeah.
There wasn't the, hey, there's 8 other options for you in this like, what are you into? I really appreciate someone that gives me options.
Yeah,
and
totally.
Yeah, and not pushing a client to remove their tree if they don't need to for a safety point of view. Like if it's not near anything and you don't need to remove it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was never said in a lot of the other companies, at least when I kind of came on the scene.
Yeah.
And that was maybe 8 years ago. 7, 8 years ago, we moved to Chattanooga.
Okay. So was Chattanooga like your first like intro to tree work, or did you get into it a little bit in any other city? Or
I studied horticulture in college, so that taught me about plants. Where'd you go to college? Texas State.
Oh, okay. That's awesome.
So that's in San Marcos, which is a very small rural town in Texas.
Okay.
So that taught me a lot about plants, but nothing about arboriculture.
Yeah.
I mean, you take a biology class, they do not go in depth about tree biology specifically. It's weird, you know, vascular systems and yeah. You know, they don't describe in depth how heartwood is dead and cutting into it, you know, it will not be regenerated, and injury to trees is, you know, non-repairable damage. So that's something I learned kind of in the trade, on the job.
Yeah.
When we lived in Wisconsin in the Midwest, I was doing ash treatments, so emerald ash borer.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my introduction into tree work. I worked for the city there, and I actually met a full-blown arborist, you know, someone who gets into trees, climbs trees, removes it. Like that was my first probably introduction. And it was pretty awe-inspiring. I was just never offered that as an option.
Yeah.
As a path. I didn't know I could climb trees and get paid to do it. So
was that guy a climber in Wisconsin for the city?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty fun job. Like, were you kind of like a parks laborer or city, like, or did you get like a more of a technician slot where you were like working with them?
I got a tech job. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So it was a summer tech job for the city because, and so I needed my pesticide license, or, you know, just my certification for the treatment. And I started injecting city, you know, public ash trees.
Wow.
But I did that alongside people with the licensure. Who were actual arborists that had full-time positions with the city.
Yeah.
So that was my probably introduction. And then my girlfriend at the time, she's now my wife, she brought us out to California. So I did a little bit of tree work in California, not a ton.
Wow.
Before moving here.
Yeah.
And when we settled here in Chattanooga, partially because of the affordability, biodiversity, we literally went on a road trip on the East Coast trying to find places to live, affordable places, because there was no way we were going to be able to afford California in the long run, because we wanted kids. So moved to Chattanooga and started doing trees.
Wow. That's really cool how you've been like, what is it, 4 different places almost doing trees, and you get to kind of run the gamut of like all different kinds, because arboriculture I feel like can be there's a lot of similarities, but also like my current supervisor with the city of Franklin, like he was an arborist and like faller out on the West Coast, and he's got a completely different experience, like way
Totally.
bigger trees, like I mean huge jobs, and the scale is just insane of the stuff he got to experience. So there's a lot of differences, but it's really cool you got to experience those, and even work with the city a little bit up in Wisconsin. And that's kind of a cool way to get introduced to tree work, is doing, because most guys would be like, oh, I had to drag brush for like 3 years. But I mean, you got straight into really caring for the canopy up there, doing ash injections. And I don't know what year was that? Did you say, do you remember?
That would have been like 2014, probably.
Okay. So maybe you were in like the middle of the curve of EAB, like slamming it up there, or was it already pretty heavy?
It was pretty heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were maxing out their removal budgets. Yeah,
Wow.
like urban forestry is very, very different. So I definitely got the perspective of a city, from a liability perspective, a perspective. Like that was pretty. That was interesting to start with.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love being able to reference other parts of the country and knowing the diseases that are in other places. And you don't really get that unless you live there.
Yeah.
Like you can read about it, but being from Texas where we have oak wilt, or in the Midwest where you have oak wilt, like that's a serious problem.
Yeah.
But we don't have that here in our area on the East Coast. But being able to reference that and kind of put people's mind at ease that we don't have that issue here, but you're not wrong. That is an issue in other parts of the nation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Knowing what drought is, like my time in California, that was bark beetles. Like that was where the cause of that pine, of losing so many pines out west.
Yeah.
So we're definitely getting more prolonged droughts here. There's more of a fire risk, which I never heard. Like the whole time I've been here, we've never talked about fires.
Yeah.
And now that's becoming more of an issue.
When was the last fire you remember?
We had South Missionary Ridge burn, and it got a few houses on the North Georgia side. There was a fire up here on Stringer's Ridge, which is blocks from me, that we're doing some clearing for the city. There's some mountain bike trails up there that has fallen trees. And so doing that kind of surveying up there just this week, they're getting attacked by ambrosia beetle and other borers. I think I saw some 2-line chestnut borer activity. So that's and Sequatchie definitely had some fires very recently, and the incline got burned a little bit with like a spot fire, apparently from falling rubble is what caused it.
Wow.
It's just dry. It's drier than I've ever seen it, but I've only been here, less than a decade.
Yeah.
So that's hard. I wish I'd been here longer to know. Like people talk about how all the camellias died in somewhere in the mid 80s because of the hard freeze.
Man, the old ladies have, they have a dialed memory on them.
They do.
My camellias, they died in 1982 and February 7th. And they remember the time they stepped out on the porch on February 8th. And they'll say, it was like overnight and they were just gone,
And they're the ones always asking about their lilacs are blooming right now. So talking about that, I'm like, man, we need to talk about your hollow water oak that's looming over your house.
Your 48-inch, water oak that's hollowed out, and I'm
not worried about that.
Yeah, you're worried about putting a felt blanket out on your dead lilac bush.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man, that's funny.
Yeah, I like, it can be very trying, but I like saying that I have to tell tree huggers that their tree needs to be removed a lot of times. And I've got to tell the developer, like, hey, this tree actually has a benefit to your property, and I would recommend keeping it. Like, there's definitely two sides to that cone.
And now that you mentioned that, I'll kind of call back to like something you said earlier about like how Austin was stricter with their ordinance. And like, I think you just shared, and also the Parks Department in Chattanooga shared the new ordinance that you guys passed down there. Can you kind of touch on that? Like, that's a pretty big step, right?
Most certainly. Yeah. It's kind of an update, which you're trying when you're working with ordinances and laws and regulations like this, you're trying to work off of precedents. So if it has been done before, it's a lot easier than starting from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
I also studied urban planning in school, so I've definitely read a lot of code, and I like city code, and it's so boring, but that's what regulates or defines our built environment, and what our trees look like, what our neighborhoods look like. I sit on the Chattanooga Tree Commission as a tree commissioner.
That's awesome.
And that's a volunteer position. It's advisory, so it's an advisory board for the city. So for the past many years, I want to say like 5, I've been going to meetings for 5 or 6 years there. And I've been a commissioner for 4 years. They're 4-year terms, so I'm sitting for another term.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of talking. You're just talking and kind of complaining about what is happening and why it's happening and how it's happening, with tree removal. But there's very little to be done. So this was the kind of the first step in the past, at least since I've been involved, where we've actually made headway.
Yeah.
So that's really great. It was passed through the city, and I don't pretend to even know what the city, how all that works.
Yeah.
It's very complicated and siloed. Each department has their own thing, which makes trees end up being very difficult because trees spans all the departments. They're involved with water quality. They're involved with livability, with equity, with affordability. Like, they're involved in every aspect, in my opinion.
I think the hard part about that too, like that I agree with you. They're involved in every aspect, but I feel like that sometimes us as whether we're like municipal arborists or like, in your stance, you work with the city and sit on the commission, but you're a residential tree company, and so I feel like sometimes us as arborists are, although everyone's involved with trees, we're the ones like defending them and being like the Lorax of like, well, we need to speak for the trees because you guys see them as problems. You're like, I'm not saying everyone does. It's maybe an overgeneralization, but a lot of, whether it be a public works side of things in a city department, they see it as like, well, this tree is getting in the way of a new sidewalk we want to do. This tree is blocking this new building, or we keep hitting this. And so that is an interesting balance of like always trying to bring some like optimism. And then, you've got obviously like tree risk to try to work with, which isn't easy either. But yeah, that is pretty interesting to try to work in that dynamic.
It's very hard. I definitely put my foot in my mouth many times. So I've learned how to talk to people in a more objective way, and falling back on what Dr. Coder says with University of Georgia, or Dr. Lindsay Purcell, or what's the other one? Dr. Gilman. Like they have very defined rules, or tree protection zones and estimations for roots. I think most people, it's just a roots conversation, which is just so boring, and people don't want to be talking about the roots. But that's where a lot of it goes. It gets pretty technical pretty quickly when people want to preserve trees, or are just ignorant about trees, or they want to do something, but they don't realize what is needed to be able to retain their existing tree. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
So that conversation's hard.
Mm-hmm. I think one thing, I agree with you. It's always hard having those conversations because there's a lot of the roots kind of thing of like the actual roots, and then literally the conversations and the science they don't, as a homeowner don't necessarily see that are actually the root, like the cause of everything. But, I think some of the saving grace, like with Gilman and Purcell, is there's a lot of science and there's a lot of truth in what they say, and there's so much benefit to the tree. But I think what the misconception is like science also always means more money and more work done to the tree, where actually, in my opinion, like a lot of what Purcell says every time I've gone to like expo or seen just videos on tree stuff, it's like, no, sometimes less can be more. Like the proper prescription, the proper, structural cut, the proper, weight reduction is actually, that's going to change the longevity of this tree by maybe that prescription and approaching it in a less is more. And, earlier you mentioned like, Chattanooga, that whole area is so saturated with trees. And so then tree companies that are more of like if they're standing, we're going to drop them. If they're broken, we're going to drop them. And so it's so easy for companies like that to thrive because when there's so many trees, especially mature trees all around a house, somebody can walk up on the, property and be like, oak, they're all going to fall. Take them out, take them out, take them out. And, where was I going there? It's a little bit of a rabbit trail, but like,
I definitely feel that it's like an ethics thing. So like a lot of the companies in town they're calling themselves arborists. They're becoming more educated, but they're using that, in my opinion, for bad. They're using it for sales. They're using it to scare people. So they learn about root flares, and then they go out to the client and they go, your tree is buried. It needs to be removed. And I'm like, well, you could just unbury it. Like that's an option.
Yeah.
And we could do that for you, but they don't necessarily offer that service.
Mm-hmm.
And so the only service all of their knowledge and all of their discussion is removing the tree.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that probably keeps me in the industry is that piece where you're trying to say, no, you don't have to remove the tree if you don't want to. One of my coworkers always talks about, well, you could always just take out the house. Like, you could just move, right? It's like, and that's not, that's just a joke.
Yeah. You got to have that humor.
Certainly. Yeah. But that's probably what keeps me in there. Keeps me in it is I'm never doing the same thing once, even if I'm doing a removal, every day this week. It's a different species. It's a different situation. It's a different rigging setup. That, and then the information part of it, where it's in trying to shed a light on all the other options that this client has, not just removal.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like, you guys do a lot of structural work on a lot of mature oaks around there. And I love seeing that. I'm a huge fan of oaks, and there's a lot of incredible trees in that area. And structural work sometimes isn't easy to explain, isn't easy to price, so and finding even the right people to go climb the tree and to do the work that you prescribe is, because maybe you're as a salesman, if different companies are listening to this or different guys, sometimes or most times actually the salesman's not actually going to go out there and do the work they prescribe. And so
most certainly,
can you maybe just like take a couple of minutes and share about like your approach for structurally pruning oaks? I know you guys prune throughout the year on them because of the decreased likelihood of oak wilt, or maybe not at all, but maybe just touch on structural pruning, because you guys, I think, are really like raising the standard or showing a standard at least.
Well, thanks so much. Yeah, that's kind of our bread and butter. That's what we do. That's what we do best. In my opinion, we're always thinking about how to do it better, how to get out to the ends of branches more easily with the least amount of effort.
Mm-hmm.
Our company structure from the very beginning and how we set it up is weird, and it's not great for growth. I'll tell you that. So I'm just the tree nerd. My wife is the business owner. She's the one with the business prowess. She's actually an engineer by trade. I've known a lot of tree people who have had partnerships where it's like two arborists get together and they get enough money together that they can start a company and have these ethics that I'm talking about. But if you don't have that business person, I wouldn't make any money as an arborist. Like, I'm just the tree nerd. And I think that's very, very important. You have to partner yourself with someone who doesn't know anything about trees, potentially. Yeah. They are, from their perspective, looking at the money, looking to make sure that everyone employed gets a paycheck. Like, that's a different perspective than the one that I have. All I can think about is gear and are we doing the correct prescription to this tree? Yeah. And like, oh my gosh, did I over prune that tree? Did I forget something? Was that Phytophthora at the base of that tree or Armillaria? Do I have to go back next month when that's blooming? Like, I'm thinking about all these craziness. And you can't have that mentality when you're running a business. So how our company is structured is she's the owner. She makes all the big money decisions. And then I focus on the everyday. There's 3 of us that do quotes, and there's only there's 10 of us in the company. And we don't have a sole quoter or a sales person. We don't even have that as a position at the company, which is very, very, like I said, very difficult to grow. Because that sales position should be a customer service position. They should be available all the time. They should call the customer back. We don't have that. And the reason why is because all of our 3 quoters, myself and 2 other certified arborists on staff, we work in the field. So we trade in and out. Yeah. And that's very, very difficult on scheduling. But I think our quality of work is better. Our time estimates are better. We forget less gear, because when you just underbid a pruning job, and you have to go back to finish it, you're going to remember that. And you're going to go, you know what? This is an overextended limb with not very good tie-ins. So I'm going to need to up my time here. It's not that we can't get to it. It's that I'm going to need to move slow because I need to move safe. So we're kind of at an impasse there with our company in growth, I think. But I don't know if we want to grow or need to grow, I think, is another kind of approach that a lot of people have started to think about, is like, how big does your tree company need to be? So the quality, and if we don't have our quality, then we're just any other tree company. Yeah. So I think that structure helps with that, but it comes with some pros and, it comes with cons. There's pros and cons with every kind of business structure. Yeah. I mean, Nick Araya always talks about how he has no foreman jobs or no leads on his. We have leads on our jobs, and it's usually the most experienced person. But we're pretty interchangeable. A lot of we require most everyone in our company to climb. Yeah. We only have one person in our company that doesn't want to climb. Usually we go after rock climbers who have a really good mental, like, head game, who are willing to do really difficult things outside for not a ton of money. Yeah. But it's so cool that it doesn't matter. It's almost like it's so fun. Anyway, going back to structural. Yeah.
What an impeccable area to find rock climbers too. It's like,
I know,
it's like, I know you might love doing this recreationally, but imagine, getting paid, even if it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars, but now you get to be on top of a mountain and in a majestic tree, and you look out and you're like, I think this is way better than rock climbing now. That's
Well,
pretty
yeah,
cool.
I don't climb rocks anymore. I just climb trees. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was definitely one of the reasons why we moved to Chattanooga was rock climbing. And the rock climbing mentality, you have to get the right rock climbers. Uh, you could definitely get like too dirt baggy or too kind of druggy.
Yeah.
So they got to be the kind of project rock climbers, the ones that are really obsessive about either gear or working with their body and getting the perfect kind of work positioning. And then being pretty obsessive about, the different crags that they go to and knowing like all their different climbs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that mindset is also, it transitions very well into trees where you're thinking about different species and how to climb them and where your tie-ins are. And
yeah,
there's a lot of overlap there. So if you get the obsessive rock climber kind of personality, that I've definitely had really good luck with as in like an employee.
Now, when you say like trying to find them, I guess I'll like phrase it like this: Did you guys have to like recruit these people, or did you literally have people who maybe found you at a park or like on a job or via website or Instagram? How did that kind of come about?
Probably our website. People find us through there. They think they want to go into tree work, or we've had several people, and a current employee who did like tower climbing or industrial climbing work.
Mm-hmm.
But that requires traveling.
Yeah.
And so trees are a way to still do that, but do it locally. You don't have to, you can come home every night.
Yeah.
So that's definitely an allure there. And all of that kind of transitions, if you were in a harness in the top of a tower, you could definitely do that in a tree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Different gear, different mindset.
That's awesome. Well, I would love to actually, sorry, we skipped over it real quick, but I'd love to get back to structural pruning because I know you have a lot to share and a lot of people could benefit from what you have. So
most certainly. Yeah. Customer expectation. I think that's kind of the first hurdle where any assessment or quote that I'm doing, it's tree biology 101. And I've come up with lots of different phrases and they're just like scripts. I just like kind of fall into them.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll say them way too quickly. So I have to like slow myself down, especially when I have like 7-8 quotes a day where I'm like trying to remember if I said this to this person yet.
Yeah.
So by the fourth or fifth quote of the day, I'm like taking notes. Like I already addressed that. I already talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're trying to tell them how to make branches more resilient to windstorms. That's the key.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of like wives are like, how do I explain this to my partner or, to my husband? Or it could be anybody. They just don't get it. And they get it when they're talking to me, but then they're like, what was he saying? Like so I always go back to weight reduction. We're not shortening the branch necessarily. We're doing weight reduction. We're trying to remove the weight at the end of the branch. So I fall back on a lot of those phrases to get people on board with what we're doing. I use the term lever arm a lot. And that resonates with some people, especially with some kind of mechanical or like physics background.
Yeah.
They really understand that.
Yeah.
Where you're removing weight at the end of this big lever arm. That way it's holding up less weight. And I'm removing strain off of the branch attachment. Mm-hmm. And like most every word in our, like how we describe trees is jargon, is like crotch, branch attachment, like tree failure, like is kind of jargon. It's like, well, how did it fail? Was it an uprooting? Was it a tear out? Was it a branch failure? Was it a codominant failure? Like all of these things I have to explain. Like I just assume they don't know what I'm saying. And try to break it down. Yeah. I love how like Dr. Shigo, he would always talk about terminology and how that's not a trunk. A trunk is on an elephant, but you have to anthropomorphize or use these normal pieces of language to get people to resonate and understand what the heck you're talking about. Yeah. And that can be really hard because I'm always trying to read up on these papers to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. So I love using the correct terms.
Yeah.
But I have to, if I do use the correct term, I'll go, that's fancy for this. And what that does is it elevates you above that next quote, that next person that comes to that house. And they're not mentioning any jargon at all. So if you sprinkle in the jargon or if you mention it initially and then explain it, I found works really well for a lot of clients.
Yeah.
One of the things starting off is I wanted to sell this to everyone that called us. I wanted to say, well, you probably need structural pruning, and this is what it is. And I'd go through the spiel and explain how and why us and all those things. And they didn't want it. They didn't like me potentially. They didn't like what I was selling. And so that was a hard pill to swallow. Not every client is your client. So knowing who is going to be interested in weight reduction pruning, in structural pruning, it is important from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Because I've had full conversations trying to communicate that, and all they wanted was the removal. And so I just wasted a whole bunch of time. So as terrible as it sounds, I try to like profile people where it's like, or at least do a lot of listening. I do a lot of talking.
Yeah.
But then when I first started quoting, I was doing way, way too much talking and education, and I needed to step back and ask them questions. And so now I start the conversation with, what's your goal?
Yeah.
Like, what are you trying to achieve here? And sometimes it comes out, they just want to talk about their understory trees and plants and shrubs, like you were talking about with the camellias, and let's talk about that. I don't know a ton about that. It wasn't until I had to learn all these bushes in college, but I don't work with bushes anymore. So,
and then you can sneak in for the old camellia ladies, be like, how your camellia would really do well if your massive oak was structure printed, and that would get all this light all into your little camellia, and it just did that shift, and next thing you got him on the hook.
Potentially, yeah, that one's a hard one. I get that a lot actually with the I need more sun.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, no, we're doing weight reduction. I can't promise you more sun because then we have to do interior thinning, and I wouldn't actually recommend that. So that's one I've definitely kind of stuck my foot in my mouth, or stepped in that pothole of, well, the expectation, the goal was to get more light, and I cannot promise that. I might be able to promise it, for this area of your yard. But if that's the purpose of why we're doing it, then we're going to start breaking rules. We're not going to follow the pruning dose, potentially. We're not going to follow the size of the cut. We're going to be making cuts not at the end of branches. So if you're selling or you're trying to explain, the structural pruning specifically, that can be hard.
Yeah.
So you're going back to that. We're not addressing the length of the branch. We're addressing the weight reduction. So really hammering that home if possible.
Yeah. I think, I worked for a company in Kansas City for a number of years. It was lawn and tree, but it was like mainly lawn, and we did trees. We did trees well, and there was a lot of us passionate guys on there, but like our clients were grass first. And so, we had a guy who kind of oversaw, or helped oversee the forestry department. And he did a study one winter that he shared from, I think Gilman did it with, he did a comparison Ed Gilman did on raising trees, to proper percentages versus thinning. I don't know if you've ever checked that out, but it was interesting. And I think his conclusion he took away from it was raising is you're going to significantly get more light to that area versus if you just tell somebody you'll just hollow everything out in their tree to get light through it. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, out west they sell like the wind thinning or storm thinning, or the uh, on the fifth coast or third coast, whatever they call it. Down in Louisiana, in Florida, they're selling the hurricane pruning,
like a spiraling or something. Yeah, something wild like that. Yeah,
and essentially, out west they're selling over thinning, and then down, on the coast they're selling topping. So
yeah.
It's hard. Knowing the expectation of the client first and foremost is really important. Having the quoter on the job, if possible, which we try to do. That way, that person trusts. They've already built a rapport with that person. Mm-hmm. So we'll have a lot of clients who are kind of squirrely. They'll be like, "Well, that's not what we talked about," and so it's really helpful to have that person right there. Because they can go, actually, we did talk about that, but we said this about that, not what you're saying. Mm-hmm. And you're trying to do that as politely as possible. But if you can understand the customer expectation, their goals, and they understand the purpose of the pruning and the amount that's being removed and the frequency which it needs to be removed, a lot of people will request removing more. And I'll go, okay, but I'm going to start prescribing root and soil healthcare. Like, you're going to have to water this tree. It's going to need additional resources.
Yeah.
So the structural pruning goes kind of hand in hand with your root and soil healthcare, which is really helpful when we're talking about potentially over pruning a tree, or a tree that's hollow that needs retrenchment pruning, or these new kind of European standards where they're talking about retaining the tree, but essentially taking as much out of the tree as you can.
Which could be super cool projects to see what they do to those. It's really cool.
Yeah, but canopy reduction pruning is scary. I mean, you're maxing out your cuts. You're going 6-inch diameter cuts, and that shouldn't be the MO. Like, that should be for a specific reason. I think that's really hard. Like, a lot of local companies I've started to see, and this is really weird with our industry, like our products are out for everyone to see. I think about that a lot when I think about the industry, where we're essentially a trades that's not taught as a trade or not respected as a trade. We're a no-collar job, but not a blue-collar job. Like, we're below blue-collar in a lot of respects. But no one is going in your house saying that, your plumbing was done wrong. Like, no one sees it. But if your tree was improperly pruned, that's out there for everyone to see.
Yeah.
And that's your reputation. That's everything.
Totally.
And it only takes one in a small town like Chattanooga to start getting a bad reputation. If you're as a tree topper,
it can be tarnished quickly. Yeah,
very much so.
Yeah. So that's really cool to see what you guys are doing and holding that standard and all that you shared. I mean, I just, if you were to ask like guys that are on my current crew in Franklin, or even, when I worked with Chop up in Nashville, like I always talked about structure pruning. I get so nerded, pumped about it just because it's awesome. And then you're doing, potentially so much good for the tree, and, setting these young trees, or maybe, semi-mature trees up for hopefully a much longer life, healthier, like better structure. I get so amped about it. So that's cool that you guys are doing that. A couple quick fire questions, maybe to wrap up, and even no rush on those too, if you want to elaborate on any of them. But this is the Everyday Arborist podcast, and kind of the hope that I have for each one is like people get to hear maybe what this week has been like, or what a day or a day in, day out kind of looks like, either for you or for your crew. Maybe shed a light on that,
Yeah, this week has been up and down. One of our lead arborists is in Moab right now, hanging out, having fun. So we're down one of our best people.
Yeah.
We also are starting a new person from scratch, like super green,
like apprenticeship almost, or
I mean, he's full time.
Oh, okay.
Yep. But he's never done tree work before.
Yeah.
So we're easing him in and training him on the job.
Mm-hmm.
But this week has been hard, but we're getting through it.
Yeah.
We've recently had a few storms move through, so we're doing a lot of storm work, which we don't typically do a lot of. We're doing a lot of preemptive work, but we still do the storm work. So we were doing that today, getting a sugar maple off a house. And before that, this week, we removed a declining, almost 50-inch diameter southern red oak in a local park. So that was for the city, which we're getting more corporate jobs now that we've been in business for close to 8 years now.
So and are you doing these with like the big trees that you're removing? Are you leasing a crane, or are you doing rigging and like into trailers, or?
We rig.
Okay.
This one was
50-inch. That's some big chunking pieces, huh? Or were you able to fell some?
We were able to fell it really large.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, this one was in the middle of a park.
Oh my
so
gosh,
we were able to section it off the area and remove the canopy and fell the trunk very large.
Wow.
So that was really helpful. We do crane work, but it's hard when we don't own a crane because we end up being more expensive. So the tree removal specific companies, that's all they do. I call them construction companies that happen to remove trees. Like they just have all the heavy equipment in order to do things most efficiently. And I just have to say, well, that's not my client. Like that's, I can bid on those jobs, but I'm going to be
target client per se. Yeah.
So if you want to get into the tree healthcare pruning and, structural pruning game, it, has a lot to do with your image, like, your brand, your reputation locally. I feel very fortunate that didn't exist here in Chattanooga, to at least not well enough. Like ABC was another company that's kind of the legacy or the old timers. Any cable that's in the city is pretty much, that was installed by ABC Tree Service.
J Hook or something like that. Yeah.
Well, they were properly installed, and they're still doing their jobs today.
Wow, that's great.
So that was a top tier company that provided the things that we do, but they're not around anymore.
Oh, gotcha.
So we definitely we're trying to fill those shoes.
Well, I mean, in the removal aspect, I think, at least, from a 30,000 foot perspective, you guys being in Chattanooga, terrain is not an easy thing there. Like, and so cranes and like slope and ridges, like they don't really match. The roads aren't huge there either. I mean, I remember going up a lot of different roads there, even when we go and visit. I'm like, a crane would definitely not come up in here, and it's only one way to get this tree out. And so, like, it's almost like a kind of a dark horse way for you guys to still be in. It's not that you're competing, but when you need that work, you still have that to be like, we are expert riggers, and we can deal with this terrain, and so that that can almost work to your advantage, I think. Just from far point of view.
There's a conservancy like reflection writing, the Arboretum there. We do a lot of work there. And
now, is that the one on the
at the base of Lookout, on the Lookout Valley side? We do work for them, but there's definitely not only half the trees we work on are accessible with a bucket or accessible with a crane.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, when you were talking about, a crane wouldn't remove that tree. It's so weird how you end up piecing every tree out in your mind, even on vacation. You're looking at how many picks could I take in this, or like, what's the weight on that particular piece?
Totally.
Like, what kind of rigging would I need could I span rig that? Could I mid rig that, like, and take it bigger? Like,
totally. Yeah, you're piecing things out as you're driving down the interstate, like swerving. Like, honey, what are you doing? Oh, sorry. I was just imagining. Sorry.
I just removed that tree in my mind.
3 times, 3 different ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, that's definitely, going back to the industry. Like, it's such a visible thing. Everyone has an opinion about it because there's not a real established standard or regulatory body that reinforces these rules and regulations behind the trees. No one is coming around going, what was the justification for that cut?
Yeah. Well, hopefully with the ordinance, I saw one instance in particular, like there's a city called Belmead here, or not city, I guess it'd be like a borough in Nashville called Belmead, and they have their own specific rules for their borough of town. And I think it's similar. I can't recall the exact numbers, but I think it's similar to what Chattanooga just updated to. And I remember I was doing an inventory for this guy, and his house that he built was a really nice house, and the gutters that he installed were hidden within the roof. And it sounds like the dumbest is the harsh word, but it was a pretty dumb idea. But like, what would happen is instead of it working like normal gutters where you can clean them out and get them back working efficiently, all the trees around the area, Belmead's a really heavily forested area, like really old, beautiful trees. But all the leaves would go into these, hidden gutters and be clogged and then flood all of his walls, like interior walls.
Oh my gosh.
And so, he was reaching out to us, because at CHOP we had the knuckle boom crane, and it was like, a little bit of a removal heavy company. And he was like asking for us to do an inventory because he had to report that to Belmead before he even went forward with removals. And so after my write-up, it was like I was sharing with him how much he was going to have to replant. And it was an insane amount of trees that were going to, of caliper wise and quantity of trees that are going to need to be replanted. And it was almost a breath of relief to me that we didn't have to remove those trees, because that was going to be a hard job. But second, also, those trees, most of them didn't have anything wrong with them. And you're kind of like, man, this policy or ordinance did the legwork for me in protecting these trees. Yeah. So that's kind of a relief. Anyways, that's kind of a short story of that experience there. But I guess one of my questions here, we just talked about removals, and we'll get back to preservation. My question is, what are 3 of your, this might be hard, but what are your 3 favorite trees you've gotten to work on, or even ones that you just like love observing and haven't had the privilege of like being able to work in yet in Chattanooga? Do you have 3 that come to mind?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, there's one chinkapin oak. So that's Quercus like Molenbergii. And it's on the river for a very wealthy client of ours. And it's leaning and it's huge. It's like 48 inches, maybe 47 inches. A huge chinkapin oak. And just the way that they grow, their exfoliating bark, and having one that big is just magnificent every single time.
And it still has its top and everything, like hasn't lost, like, wow.
Yeah, it's, they always want to grow around limestone, so it's kind of right on the top of a ridge. So very, very overextended branches and a very high wind load site. It's just getting blasted by wind all the time. So the way that it grows is crazy. Like you make your 2 or 3 inch cut and you count rings, and it's older than me.
Mm-hmm.
It's pushing, 36, 37 years old.
Wow.
For like a 2 or 3 inch diameter cut. It's crazy thinking about that.
Yeah.
So that's one of my favorite trees that we work on.
Yeah. That's awesome.
We've pruned it twice over the years. I've also done tree growth regulator or pactobutrazole. I call that a root stimulant. Shortens the inner nodes and uses that surplus energy for the roots. So we've done that. With the drought last fall, it's pretty concerning how many trees are going to be dead this growing season. I think it's going to be a ton. Like we're just now seeing things leaf out, at least down in the valleys at lower elevation. And starting to see a lot of trees die. Another tree that kind of comes to mind is a white pine just up the street from us that died.
Man,
I think it was a veterinarian that like property, and they sold it to somebody. And I think they cut the water. They stopped irrigating on their property.
Oh.
All their arborvitaes died. Their white pine died. And this is a big, like 2-foot diameter white pine, which is, we're on like the southern edge of white pine anyway, in the southern Appalachians. So they need water. Like if they don't have, they want to be in Canada,
Yeah. Why am I down here choking? Yeah.
Yeah. So that was one that comes to mind that was like, I saw every day.
Mm-hmm.
I never worked on it, but just seeing that thing die was pretty shocking. It was like, oh wow, like we are in a drought, and they didn't water, and it was very clear.
Wow.
And I had neighbors all asking why that tree was removed. And I was like, didn't you see, like, I've been seeing this thing thinning for years. Like it died. But people don't see trees the way we do.
Man. Last thing, you are super passionate about trees, and you've been really, it seems like, all over the country and having different experiences. Might even be a harder question. Is there a favorite memory from a job, or like whether it be a good thing or maybe like the wildest thing that you could have ever imagined unfold on a job? Like, you have anything that comes to mind?
Oof, no. Everything kind of blends together.
Oh yeah, totally.
I think the thing that I just love climbing trees. Whenever I'm really tired or crabby or like up with a kid, last night or whatever.
Yeah.
Or not getting along with my wife, who is also the business owner, who is, like, I get in the tree and I'm just in heaven. It's like, that's really helpful.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Mentally. And the structural prunes are a real feel good thing.
Totally.
Because it's almost like a caring thing. It's like, you can't really think about your problems or yourself. You're thinking about what's the correct cut for out here. And you can you can definitely get lost in the sauce of, calling down your groundy, like, hey, which cut should I make? And they're like, I don't know. You're the one up there. I can't even tell diameters from down here. Like you're 60 foot up in the tree. So, I think, I was just in a water oak this morning. It was a big tree. I think it was another, I put TGR on it. So it was 45 inches. And it's up on Missionary Ridge. So it's a water oak. It doesn't want to live there. It was definitely planted. And it was wider than it was tall.
Wow.
And that lowest branch on the trunk is almost the same diameter as the trunk. So it's a codominant, that's a double trunk. And this thing goes out, 50 feet at least overextended branch. So getting out there and doing pruning. And then the client asked like when he should prune it again. Like he really understood what we were doing and why we were doing it. And I was like, you may not need to. What if we'd installed a cable? It'd probably be cheaper. So that's another kind of aspect of structural pruning that I think we're moving more into is, well, literally a cable would be cheaper for us to do because it takes, 2 climbers, 1 groundy to prune this 45-inch diameter water oak. And that'll take us 4 or 5 hours. So we can install a cable in probably 2 hours with the same amount of people.
Are you guys doing mostly steel, or do you do a dynamic kind of a
We do
synthetic?
A lot of steel because we're working on bigger trees. But we do dynamic too on smaller trees.
Yeah.
I am so gun shy. I've seen so many girdled trees from dynamic cable.
Yeah.
I saw a photo. I want to know more about this and if it's viable, of someone installing bolts and then putting dynamic cable in between them. I would love that idea because that client never calls me again. And, it's a decade later and I know it's not going to girdle. That would be great. And so that kind of goes back to that ethics thing, whereas I decide not to put in dynamic, not because like maybe that's the right choice, but I'm so scared of the client not calling me back and redoing that in 7 years after it's UV degraded.
Yeah.
That it's going to girdle the tree. We do dynamic cables though, but majority of our stuff, I'm pruning the smaller trees. I'm doing 60% reduction on the co-dominant leader to try to do your leader training.
Yeah.
So I'm doing a lot of steel because we're in bigger trees.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think when you mentioned the hardware just then, I felt like maybe his name is sorry, he might listen to this. Tree Pirate is his Instagram name, but I think he shared like some hardware year or two ago about like an oscillating ring that he put in the middle that was really cool. I was like, oh my, like whatever arborist supply company starts to get this, I feel like it's going to sell like a hotcake, because like that idea of an oscillating ring in the middle to where you could join and kind of create that prism, or like kind of the triangulation that like I like to look at and look for. And then, that idea that you mentioned of like, through bolt and then attaching that synthetic. It's a little bit more work, but like you think about the ethic of it, longevity of that cable. I mean, obviously you still have the UV thing to consider, but it's just nice. I feel like in cabling, options are your greatest benefit of just having so many different options to work with. So
most certainly.
Yeah. Well, Ben, I really enjoyed the chat. And I tell you what, if you figure out how to master working with your wife as the owner and it seems like you're doing pretty good at it, but you could probably make like a best-selling book. It probably once you nail that down. So that's fun that you guys do that. It's been encouraging to hear all the good that you guys are doing in Chattanooga, and it's really fun to learn about your team and keep sharing on Instagram. I'm sure there's a ton of people watching like me that are like, man, this is so awesome to see this going on in the industry. So that's really cool.
I certainly don't post enough. I've definitely gotten out of practice.
Well, that's, when
it takes a lot of work to do all that.
Oh posting. My gosh. It's a lot. And then like, you have kids, I have kids, and you're balancing like being present and like living in the real moment with your coworkers, or with like once you're with your family at the end of the day. So
it comes down to priorities. So. Yeah, it's just like the lowest priority is your IG stream or whatever you like. That's definitely been pushed to not a priority right now.
Yeah.
But I wish. I mean, that's where I learn a lot. It's just being bored, sitting on the potty, like like scrolling through how people did today in the trees. Like,
yeah,
it's definitely an obsession. We do this all day, and then we get home, and all we want to do is talk about it more, and look at other people doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in the bathroom somehow looking at some guy in Belgium reducing a London plane tree. It's like the craziness of technology is wild. But yeah, good luck with the new team member as well. It'd be interested to hear after a while how that works out and if they develop into somebody who gets super stoked on tree work. Is he a rock climber too, the newer guy? Or
yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. We're always talking about soft catches to describe, like, it's just the terminology what you're doing is very similar, but it's called something different.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can like live in both worlds, it's helpful. I think he's really jazzed. I mean, we've already gotten him in the tree, which is, I try to do that as early as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Which is trying. That's hard because you're trying to do on-the-job training, and there's not always a line item, a tree, a task for them to do that, because I want them focused on gassing up the saws and doing all the menial stuff. But if they don't have that kind of light at the end of the tunnel, then what's the point? I push everyone to climb.
That's awesome. That's super cool. You're invested in them like that. And I think I'll put it this way. You get them on the little Yale Bifrost Highway, what do they call that? The Rainbow Highway. You get them on that rope and you've set them on a journey for life. So.
Bridge to Asgard or whatever.
Yeah, the bridge to Asgard. Yeah. Yeah. Man.
You could be a god too.
You could be a tree god as well. That's awesome. Well, hey, Ben, thank you so much for chatting. I know we went a little over time, but I enjoyed the heck out of it. And hopefully we get to maybe hear from you down the road again
of course,
on the podcast or just keep in touch. So I'm actually headed down to Ottawa this weekend for Easter. My sister lives she lives in Chatsworth still, and my parents live in Ottawa. So I'll be down in that area and enjoying.
They have any big trees?
Chattanooga. Well, I don't know if you remember, I sent you a comment on Instagram, was it 2 weeks ago? They have a neighbor who's got a black oak behind their house. And it's the classic, like, old person comment where it's like, the tree roots have destroyed my entire house. My foundation's all cracked and busted. My walls are falling in and everything's gone. It's going because that
tree. Gotta blame something.
Yeah, and then when you go to the back, from my parents' yard, you look up, you're like, this is the most majestic black oak I've ever seen. Like, there's nothing wrong with this thing. And so my mom was asking me for a reference, and I'm like, please if they're doing anything, call Scenic City. Even if it's a drive, I'll pay Ben's gas to get over there so he can save this thing. Because it's like a new construction. Ottawa's blowing up right now, the whole area. They are. And they have just slaughtered acres and acres of timber, or timber's not the right word for it, but good trees.
Yeah.
And it's up on this ridge where their house is in a newer neighborhood. And that black oak is the last standing of that whole forest that was there. And so I'm like, please. But yeah, the parents really have kind of a bearish lawn that I have since planted with just so much stuff. So we'll see how that does. And that was only 3 years ago when they moved in. But anyways. But yeah, Ben, good chatting, and we'll go ahead and stop here.